Jack Carter wiped sweat from his brow as he stood in the grand arena of Savannah Prime, surrounded by towering alien warriors. The air smelled of burning incense and something metallic, like hot plasma. He wasn't sure how, but somehow, in the span of 10 minutes, he had gone from Earth diplomat to combatant in an alien duel. And worse, he had no idea what he was fighting for. Human. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena. You have accepted the trial of union. Do you yield? Jack frowned. Trial of union. That didn't sound like a standard peace negotiation. He turned his head slightly toward the towering figure before him. Vashira Zinkor, the warrior princess of Savannah Prime. I think there's been a mistake, Jack said, holding up his hands. I just thought I was accepting a friendly match. You know, intergalactic bonding, mutual respect, diplomatic stuff. Vashira's golden eyes narrowed. A challenge was issued. You accepted. Do not dishonor this fight with cowardice. Cowardice? Jack huffed. Typical warrior mindset. The Savannians were a race of elite fighters, bound by ancient traditions. To them, strength was the only language that mattered. Earth had sent Jack to negotiate trade agreements, not to get into an alien gladiator match. But here he was, holding a ceremonial dueling staff, facing off against a woman whose reputation made seasoned warlords tremble. Jack exhaled. All right, let's get this over with. A deep drum sounded, and Vashira lunged. She was fast, too fast. Jack barely ducked under her sweeping kick before rolling aside to avoid the downward strike of her staff. Not bad, Jack muttered, straightening. But I prefer fights where I don't get crushed into the sand. He sidestepped again, making her miss by an inch. Keep moving. Keep talking. If he could wear her out. Vashira spun with shocking precision, her staff slicing the air just past his ear. Stand and fight, Terran. Jack grinned. I am fighting, just differently. He danced backward, forcing her to chase him. Savannians were used to direct head-on combat, but Jack, he was human, and humans were unpredictable. The crowd roared as Jack flipped over her next strike and rolled between her legs. He popped up behind her and tapped her shoulder with his staff. Tag, you're it. The entire arena fell silent. Vashira slowly turned, her golden eyes locked onto his. Jack swallowed. Uh-oh. With a sudden burst of movement, she closed the distance. Jack had no time to dodge. She tackled him, pinning him against the hot sand. He groaned. Okay. That was. She grabbed his wrist and lifted it high. The Terran has won, she declared. The crowd erupted into deafening cheers. Jack blinked. Wait. What? Before he could ask what was going on, the announcer stepped forward. By the customs of Savannah Prime, this duel was a sacred rite of union. The winner claims the right to the marriage pact. Jack's stomach dropped. I'm sorry, marriage what? Vashira smirked. You fought well. The pact is sealed. Jack stared at her, then at the cheering crowd. He had just accidentally married a warrior princess. Jack sat frozen on a throne of polished obsidian, his mind racing. The crowd had long since left the arena, but the roaring chants of union, still echoed in his ears. Union, as in marriage. As in, he just got married to an alien princess in the middle of a peace negotiation. This is a joke, right? He muttered. Some weird alien prank. Maybe a diplomatic test. Vashira, seated beside him, let out a small chuckle. You believe we jest? Jack turned to her, eyes wide. Yes, obviously. Humans don't just accidentally get married in the middle of a fight. Vashira leaned forward, her gaze steady. Among my people, strength is proof of worth. You defeated me in ritual combat, which means you are strong enough to stand at my side. It is law. Jack ran a hand through his hair. Okay, well, where I come from, marriage requires consent. You know, vows, a ceremony, maybe a nice dinner first. Vashira smirked. You accepted the duel, and you won. That was the vow. Jack groaned. I didn't know that was the deal. A voice interrupted their argument. Ah, a most glorious day. Jack looked up to see a tall Zyvanian elder standing before them, dressed in ceremonial robes. His eyes gleamed with approval. This union strengthens the bond between our peoples, the elder declared. With the blood of a warrior and the wit of a Terran, your offspring will be legendary. Jack choked on air. I'm sorry, offspring. Vashira chuckled. Do not worry, human. We are bound, but we will move at our own pace. Jack exhaled in relief. At least she wasn't expecting space babies immediately. The elder clapped his hands. Now, as per tradition, the groom shall prove his worth before the union is finalized. Jack narrowed his eyes. Didn't I just prove it by winning the fight? Vashira shook her head. That was only the first test. There are 3 more. Jack buried his face in his hands. Of course there are. The first trial, the Feast of Honor. Minutes later, Jack found himself at a massive banquet table inside the royal halls of Savannah Prime. The room was vast, with towering pillars and glowing blue torches that cast flickering shadows across the dark stone walls. Warriors and nobles sat around the table watching him closely. Jack eyed the towering plates of alien food before him. Some dishes looked decent, steamed root vegetables, seared meats, but others were less inviting. A plate was set before him, piled high with what looked like squirming, iridescent worms. Jack forced a smile. Bob, what exactly is this? Vashira leaned in. It is the serpent's delight, a delicacy. It is a test of fortitude. Jack took a slow breath. Fortitude, huh? He glanced at the warriors watching him. If he hesitated, they'd see him as weak. If he refused, he might insult his new wife's people. With a forced grin, Jack grabbed a handful of the squirming things and shoved them into his mouth. The room went dead silent. The texture was horrible, chewy, slimy, and slightly crunchy at the same time. He fought the urge to gag. Then, spice. A wave of blistering heat erupted in his mouth, like swallowing a mouthful of lava. Jack's eyes watered as he clenched his fists, trying not to scream. Vashira watched him, amusement flickering in her gaze. Jack swallowed. He slammed his hand on the table. Delicious, he rasped. The hall erupted into cheers. Vashira's smirk deepened. Perhaps this union will not be so dull after all. Jack was still recovering from the spicy nightmare he had just swallowed when Vashira stood up. The banquet hall fell silent as she raised a hand. The first trial is complete, she announced. Now my mate shall face the trial of strength. Jack groaned. Oh, come on. I already beat you in a fight. Vashira smirked. That was a duel. This is a demonstration. Before Jack could protest, 2 towering Zavanian warriors stepped forward, their armor gleaming under the hall's torchlight. Each was easily twice Jack's size, their muscles rippling beneath ceremonial combat gear. One of them, a particularly massive warrior named Korvek, crossed his arms. The trial of strength is simple, human. You must stand against me. Jack frowned. Stand against you in what way? Korvek grinned. You will see. The warriors led Jack outside to a massive stone courtyard. The air was cool, but the gathering crowd added to the pressure. Hundreds of Zavanians surrounded the arena, eager to witness the challenge. Vashira leaned in, her tone teasing. Try not to embarrass yourself, mate. Jack rolled his eyes. Great vote of confidence. A colossal metal pillar was dragged into the courtyard and placed upright in the center. Jack blinked at it. What? What is that for? Korvek grabbed the pillar and tilted it forward, demonstrating its weight. The metal groaned under its own mass. You must hold it, Korvek said, for as long as possible. Jack's jaw dropped. They wanted him to hold up an actual metal tower. The warriors handed him a pair of reinforced gloves. Jack hesitated but took them. Backing out wasn't an option, not with hundreds of alien eyes watching. He exhaled. Okay, fine, let's do this. Korvek nodded, then effortlessly shoved the pillar toward Jack. Jack braced himself. The instant the weight hit his hands, his legs nearly buckled. It was like trying to hold up a collapsing building. The sheer force made his arms tremble, and his muscles screamed in protest. The crowd roared in excitement. Jack gritted his teeth. No way was he giving up that easily. He adjusted his stance, bending his knees slightly to distribute the weight. His arms burned, his shoulders ached, but he refused to falter. Korvac watched him, impressed. Not bad. Human. Let's see how long you last. The seconds stretched into agonizing minutes. Jack could feel sweat dripping down his back, his breath coming in sharp exhales, his vision blurred, but he held firm. Then, suddenly, Va-Shira stepped forward. She stopped just inches from him, tilting her head. Are you struggling, mate? Jack forced a grin. Nope, just casually holding up a building. No big deal. Va-Shira's eyes gleamed with amusement. Impressive, but you must endure a little longer. Jack groaned, but didn't let go. His muscles screamed for relief. His legs shook, but still, he held firm. The crowd's chants grew louder, warriors pounding their fists against their chests in approval. Then, finally, Korvac stepped in and relieved him of the weight. Jack stumbled back, gasping for air. His arms felt like jelly, but he was still standing. The courtyard erupted in cheers. Va-Shira crossed her arms, a small smile playing on her lips. You lasted longer than expected. Jack smirked, still panting. I'm full of surprises. Korvac clapped him on the back, a little too hard, and laughed. You have earned respect, human. I will not challenge your union. Jack let out a relieved breath, glad to hear it. Va-Shira leaned in, her voice soft but teasing. Only one trial remains, mate. I hope you're ready. Jack exhaled. Do I have a choice? Va-Shira smirked. Jack had barely caught his breath from the last trial when Va-Shira raised her hand again. The crowd, still buzzing with excitement, fell into silence. The final trial is upon us, she declared. Jack groaned. Great. Does this one involve more heavy lifting? Va-Shira smirked. No, this trial is about intelligence. Jack perked up. Now we're talking. Finally, something I have a shot at winning. Korvac, still rubbing his chin from earlier, chuckled. Do not celebrate too soon, human. The trial of wits has humbled even the greatest Zavanian minds. Jack shot Va-Shira a sideways glance. Should I be worried? Va-Shira gave him an unreadable smile. That depends on how clever you truly are, mate. Jack sighed. Of course. The trial begins. The warriors led him to a grand hall, its walls lined with ancient stone carvings. In the center sat a massive circular table, its surface carved with symbols, pathways, and intricate patterns. Atop it were 5 metal spheres, each one etched with strange alien markings. An elder warrior stepped forward. The trial of wits is simple. Before you are 5 spheres, one contains the mark of the ancestors. 4 do not. Jack frowned. Okay. The elder continued. Each of us will give you a clue. Some will be truthful, some will be lies. Jack groaned. Ah, fantastic. A logic puzzle. Just what I needed after almost getting crushed. Va-Shira leaned in, whispering teasingly, I hope your human brain is as sharp as your tongue. Jack smirked. Oh, don't worry. I got this. The first warrior stepped forward. The mark is not in the 1st or 2nd sphere. The second warrior nodded. The mark is in the 3rd or 4th sphere. The third warrior scoffed. No, the mark is not in the 4th sphere. The 4th warrior crossed his arms. The second warrior is lying. The final warrior, an older Zavanian with piercing eyes, simply said, the mark is exactly where it should be. Jack blinked. Well, that's not helpful. He stared at the table, rubbing his chin. Okay, think, Jack, think. The second warrior said the mark was in the 3rd or 4th sphere, but the third warrior said it wasn't in the 4th. That meant if the second warrior was telling the truth, it had to be in the 3rd. But then the 4th warrior said the second warrior was lying, which meant the mark wasn't in the 3rd or 4th at all. Jack's eyes narrowed. That left only one possibility. He reached out and placed his hand on the 5th sphere. The crowd fell into hushed silence. The elder warrior studied him, his expression unreadable. Then he stepped forward and pressed the sphere's surface. A glowing blue mark appeared. The crowd erupted in cheers. Jack grinned. Ha, knew it. Va-Shira stared at him, clearly impressed. You solved it faster than I expected. Jack crossed his arms, smirking. What can I say? I'm full of surprises. Korvek gave a hearty laugh. It seems this human is not just strong, but clever too. The elder warrior stepped forward. You have passed the final trial. You are now one of us. Jack exhaled in relief. Finally, Vashura approached him, standing close. You have proven yourself worthy, mate. Her voice was softer now, almost proud. Jack raised an eyebrow. So, does this mean we're officially married now? Vashura smirked. Yes. And now, your real challenge begins. Jack blinked. Wait, what? But before he could ask, the crowd burst into celebration, lifting their new brother in arms into the air. Jack groaned. I have a bad feeling about this. The grand hall shook with cheers, the sound of drums and stomping feet filling the air. Jack barely had time to react before strong hands grabbed him, hoisting him into the air as warriors shouted his name. Jack, Jack, Jack. His stomach lurched as he was passed between massive Zavanian warriors, their strength making him feel like a ragdoll. Okay, I get it. I won, he shouted, trying to keep his balance. Vashura stood below, arms crossed, watching with amusement. They celebrate your victory. Enjoy it. Yeah, well, I'd enjoy it more if I wasn't being tossed around like a sack of potatoes. With a final cheer, they set him down, hard. He stumbled, barely catching himself. Someone clapped a hand on his back, nearly sending him to the floor again. Korvek laughed. You are one of us now, Jack. A warrior by right, and Vashura's mate. Jack groaned, rubbing his shoulders. Yeah, about that. He turned to Vashura, eyeing her carefully. So, now what? Am I supposed to do some kind of ritual? Sign a space marriage contract? What's the next step? Vashura's lips curled into a knowing smirk. The next step. She snapped her fingers, and suddenly the warriors parted, revealing a massive feast laid out in the center of the hall. Roasted meats sizzled over open flames, bowls of rich sauces steamed, and strange alien fruits glowed softly under the torchlight. The scent of spices filled the air, making Jack's stomach growl. The feast is the next step, Vashura said. We honor you. We celebrate our bond. Jack's face lit up. Now that, I can get behind. A feast to remember. Jack barely had time to sit before a heaping plate was placed in front of him. Vashura sat beside him, her presence commanding yet comfortable. As he took his first bite, his eyes widened. Oh wow, this is actually good. Korvek grinned. You thought we'd feed you something unworthy. I mean, I didn't expect it to taste like barbecue, but this is amazing. The warriors laughed, slamming their fists against the table. As the feast continued, Jack felt the weight of the night settle in. The past few days had been insane. Crash landing, meeting Vashura, being challenged to prove himself, and somehow coming out victorious. And now, here he was, surrounded by warriors who had once doubted him, cheering his name. His eyes drifted to Vashura, who sat tall and proud, taking a sip from a ceremonial cup. She caught him staring and raised an eyebrow. You are staring, mate. Jack smirked, just taking it all in. You, me, this whole situation. Vashura leaned in slightly. Do you regret it? Jack let out a breath. Regret? No. Am I still trying to wrap my head around it? Absolutely. Vashura chuckled. Good. I would be disappointed if you were too comfortable. Jack shook his head. Oh, don't worry. Comfortable is the last thing I feel right now. A husband's duty. Just as Jack was beginning to relax, Korvek stood, raising his cup. To Jack, the first human to stand among us, may he prove worthy of his mate. Jack paused mid-bite. Wait, what? The warriors cheered. Vashura smirked. Jack set down his food, suddenly suspicious. Define prove worthy. Vashura took another slow sip before answering. A husband must demonstrate his strength, his wit, and his loyalty. Jack blinked. I thought I already did that. Vashura's expression was unreadable. That was for the clan. She leaned in, her voice dropping slightly. Now, you must prove it to me. Jack swallowed, hard. The warriors laughed, some slamming their cups against the table in anticipation. Jack exhaled. Oh boy. Vashura's smirk deepened. The night is still young, mate. The feast had ended, but the night was far from over. Jack felt the weight of every warrior's gaze as they gathered in the great hall, waiting for what came next. He had no idea what that was. Vashura sat beside him, her expression calm yet expectant. Across from them, Korvek smirked, clearly enjoying Jack's confusion. Jack sighed and leaned closer to Vashura. All right, I played along with the feast. I smiled through the toasts, but now I need answers. What exactly do I have to do to prove myself to you? Vashura set down her ceremonial cup and turned to face him. It is tradition. A mate must show his devotion through a trial. Jack frowned. I literally fought a guy today. That was for the clan. Vashura corrected. This is for me. The warriors let out approving murmurs, their eyes gleaming with amusement. Jack rubbed his face. Okay, so what is this trial of devotion? Jack straightened, taking in her words carefully. And how do I prove all that? She turned and gestured toward 3 towering stone doors at the far end of the hall. Each was marked with ancient Zavanian symbols glowing faintly in the dim torchlight. You must choose a trial, Vashura said. Each door leads to a different test. Jack swallowed. And what happens if I pick the wrong one? Vashura smirked. Then I will enjoy watching. The warriors burst into laughter, clapping their hands against their knees. Jack exhaled sharply and shook his head. Great, just great. 3 doors, 1 choice. Jack approached the doors, studying the symbols carefully. The left door bore a symbol that resembled a storm, crackling energy pulsing from its carvings. The middle door had an engraving of a beast's eye, staring outward as if it were alive. The right door showed an intricate pattern, woven like vines, pulsing with a faint, soothing glow. Jack scratched his chin. So, what? One of these is a husband test. Korvek chuckled from behind. 1 tests your strength, 1 your courage, and 1 your heart. Jack turned to Vashura. And which one do you want me to choose? Vashura folded her arms. That is for you to decide. Jack sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Strength and courage, I already proved. That left. He reached out and pushed open the rightmost door. The warriors murmured in surprise. Vashura raised an eyebrow. Interesting. The trial of heart. Jack stepped into the chamber, his breath catching. It was peaceful. A vast, open space, illuminated by soft, glowing orbs that floated like fireflies. A warm breeze brushed against his skin, carrying a faint, floral scent. In the center of the chamber stood a single pedestal. On it lay a small, delicate object, a woven bracelet made of silver threads and glowing strands of Zavanian silk. Jack stepped forward cautiously. Okay, not what I expected. Vashura's voice echoed from behind. This trial is simple. Jack turned. She was standing at the threshold, watching him carefully. A warrior's mate is not chosen only for battle, she said. A bond is more than strength and skill. It is trust, commitment, and understanding. Jack looked down at the bracelet. So, what do I do? Vashura stepped closer. You must weave the final thread. Jack blinked. You want me to make a bracelet? Korvek, watching from the doorway, nearly choked laughing. Jack turned to Vashura, exasperated. You're messing with me, right? Vashura's face remained unreadable. If you believe this is trivial, you are free to leave. Jack hesitated. He could feel the weight of her words. This wasn't a joke. He took a slow breath and stepped forward, rolling up his sleeves. All right, let's do this. A different kind of strength. Jack carefully picked up the delicate silk thread. It was softer than anything he had ever touched, pulsing faintly in his fingers. He studied the way the other threads had been woven. Tight, intricate, full of care. He frowned. This wasn't just a task. It was a message. A warrior could fight. A warrior could win. But could a warrior be patient? Could a warrior build something fragile without breaking it? Jack worked slowly, his fingers clumsy at first, but he focused, determined not to mess up. Minutes passed, then an hour. The warriors outside had gone quiet. Even Korvek had stopped laughing. Jack tied the final knot, sealing the weave. The bracelet glowed softly, the threads binding together in a pulse of energy. He exhaled and stepped back. Done. Vashira stepped forward and picked up the bracelet, turning it in her hands. Silence stretched between them. Then she smiled. Jack's heart skipped a beat. She took his wrist and, with careful precision, tied the bracelet around it. "You have passed," she murmured. Jack swallowed. He wasn't sure why, but those words meant more than all the cheers he had heard before. The trial was over. But something told him the real journey was just beginning. The chamber was silent, except for the soft hum of energy from the bracelet now tied around Jack's wrist. The woven strands pulsed faintly, as if alive. He turned his hand, watching how the light shimmered against his skin. Vashira still held his wrist, her fingers warm and firm. Jack looked up at her, searching her expression for some sign of what she was thinking. "Did I really pass?" he asked. Vashira nodded. "You proved patience, care, and devotion. That is enough." Korvek, who had been watching from the doorway, finally let out a sharp laugh. "I cannot believe it. The human chose the hardest trial and succeeded." The warriors outside erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the halls. Jack turned to see many of them grinning, clapping, and nodding with approval. It seemed they had all been waiting to see if he would fail. Jack smirked, shaking his head. "You all thought I'd mess up, didn't you?" Korvek clapped a hand on his shoulder. "We had a betting pool." Jack groaned. "Of course, you did." Vashira glanced at Korvek. "And who won?" Korvek grinned. "You did, my lady. You bet on him from the beginning." Jack blinked in surprise, turning to her. "You were sure I'd pass." Vashira tilted her head slightly. "Not sure, but I had faith." Jack felt something stir in his chest, something warm, something steady. He rubbed the back of his neck, trying to shake off the feeling. "Well, I guess that means I'm officially part of the clan now." Vashira's expression turned serious. "Not just part of the clan. You are my chosen." The hall fell silent again. Jack could feel the weight of her words. Chosen. Not just a warrior, not just an ally. He was hers. A strange mix of emotions rushed through him. Excitement, uncertainty, even a little fear. But beneath it all, there was something undeniable, a connection. Jack let out a slow breath. "So, what happens now?" Vashira studied him for a moment, then turned to the gathered warriors. "The trials are complete. The human has proven himself. The feast will continue." The warriors cheered again, but Jack barely heard them. Vashira was already walking away, and without thinking, he followed. Under the night sky, Vashira led him through the corridors of the stronghold, away from the noise of celebration. Jack didn't question it. He simply walked beside her, the cool air of the night brushing against his skin as they stepped outside. The twin moons of Savannah hung high above, casting a silver glow over the vast landscape. Strange, luminous plants dotted the terrain, pulsing with faint blue and violet hues. The wind carried the scent of something wild and unfamiliar. Jack took a deep breath. "You know, I never thought I'd end up on an alien planet, fighting warriors and weaving magical bracelets." Vashira glanced at him. "Do you regret it?" Jack met her gaze and, without hesitation, shook his head. "No." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Then, slowly, she reached up and touched the bracelet on his wrist. "This bond is not just ceremony. It means something." Jack nodded. "I get that." He hesitated before adding, "And I won't take it lightly." Vashira's expression softened, just slightly. "Good." They stood in silence for a while, watching the alien stars twinkle above. The moment was peaceful, yet something hung between them, something unsaid. Finally, Jack broke the silence. "So, what does being your chosen actually mean?" Vashira's lips curled into a small smile. "It means you stand by my side. It means you share in my victories, and I in yours. It means you are no longer just a visitor." Jack exhaled, letting her words sink in. "That sounds big." "It is." He turned to her, searching her expression. "And what if I fail? What if I let you down?" Vashira's eyes met his, unwavering. "Then we face it together." Jack wasn't sure why, but that answer sent a warmth through him stronger than any victory he had achieved so far. He smiled. Then I guess I'd better not fail. Vashira smirked. That would be wise. The night stretched on, quiet and endless. Jack wasn't sure what came next, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid to find out. Jack stood beside Vashira, the alien moons shining above them. The wind carried the distant echoes of laughter and music from the feast hall. But here, under the open sky, everything felt still, almost peaceful. For the first time since arriving on this planet, he wasn't just an outsider. He wasn't a guest, a fighter, or a negotiator. He was chosen. Vashira turned to him, her expression unreadable. You still seem unsure. Jack let out a soft laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. Well, yeah, it's not every day a guy joins an alien warrior clan. There's no manual for this. Vashira arched a brow. Do humans always need instructions? Jack smirked. Only when we don't want to mess things up. She studied him for a moment before nodding. Then listen well, Jack. He straightened, sensing something important was about to be said. This bond between us is more than tradition. It is honor, trust, and duty. If you stand with me, you stand with my people. You fight when we fight. You celebrate when we celebrate. You will never be alone, but neither will you ever turn your back on those who depend on you. Jack's chest tightened. It wasn't just words. He could feel the weight of them. It wasn't about proving himself anymore. It wasn't about just surviving. It was about belonging. Jack took a slow breath. And what if I make mistakes? Vashira's gaze didn't waver. Then you learn, and you rise again. Jack looked down at the woven bracelet on his wrist. Its glow faint but steady. He thought about everything that had led him here. The battles, the misunderstandings, the challenges. He thought about her, and for the first time, he knew his answer. Jack met her gaze and nodded. Then I stand with you. A new challenge. Vashira gave a slight nod of approval. Good. Before Jack could say anything else, a voice echoed from the darkness behind them. Well, this is touching. Jack turned to see a tall, armored warrior stepping from the shadows. His presence alone made the air feel colder, heavier. Unlike the other warriors, his armor was dark, almost black, with streaks of silver etched like battle scars across the surface. Jack didn't need an introduction to know this guy was trouble. Vashira's stance shifted slightly, subtle, but ready for a fight. Vardrak, she said, her voice sharp. Jack recognized the name. This was one of the clan's strongest rivals, a commander from a faction that didn't agree with Vashira's leadership. Vardrak's cold gaze swept over Jack. So this is your human. Jack crossed his arms. Name's Jack. You can say it. The warrior smirked. You have spirit, but spirit won't protect you when the time comes. Jack's jaw clenched. When what time comes? Vardrak's gaze flicked to Vashira. You think bonding with an outsider will make you stronger, but strength is tested in battle. And you're human. He let out a short, mocking laugh. Is not ready. Vashira took a step forward. Jack has proven himself. Vardrak's eyes gleamed with challenge. Then let him prove it again. Jack exhaled through his nose. He had a feeling walking away wasn't an option. He glanced at Vashira. This some kind of official challenge? Vashira's eyes held his for a moment before she spoke. It is an old tradition. A warrior's bond can be tested if an outside force questions it. If the challenger wins, the bond is considered weak. Jack understood the message. If he lost, it wouldn't just be about him. It would be about Vashira's leadership, her honor, and everything she had fought for. Jack sighed, rolling his shoulders. All right, let's get this over with. Vardrak grinned. Bold. I like that. He stepped into the clearing, removing his heavy outer armor and rolling his shoulders, his muscles tensed, ready. Let's see if your spirit matches your skill. Jack clenched his fists. This wasn't just a fight. This was a warrior's oath, and he wasn't about to break it.